Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Vikings Spin. I'm your host Jason, and today we're going to go through some of the moves that the Vikings have made here in advance of the season opener. After a flurry of activity, which saw numerous cuts, some of the notable cuts were actually Alex Boone, who was thought by many to be penciled in as the starting left guard. He was cut. Also, defensive tackle Will Sutton, who we picked up from the Bears, didn't quite make the cut either. Other than that, there weren't really too many surprises. Maybe other than you see the losers of the specialist battles, Marshall Kane, the kicker, and Taylor Semenk, the punter, were beaten out and cut. But the Vikings, after making those cuts, assembled their practice squad and also made an addition off of waivers. So the practice squad, as it stands right now, has Elijah Lee. Odenegbo made it at defensive end. Hill at running back. Kyle Carter at tight end. Dylan Bradley, defensive tackle. Horace Richardson, cornerback. Caleb Jones, wide receiver, and we picked up Slaughter, the quarterback that was playing with Denver. They added Blake Bell, who they claimed off of waivers. He's a tight end that played for the 49ers. Has a history with Coach Tony Sperano, our offensive line coach. Was actually the tight ends coach over with the 49ers with Bell in his rookie season, so there's a connection there. A few players went that were cut to injured reserve. They were have the waived injured designation. Dayton Jones, he's probably going to get a settlement worked out where he can be totally free. Bucky Hodges, I think the plan with him is to see if he can clear waivers, and he would go on injured reserve for the first 8 weeks, and then the Vikings would have the option to either add him back to the 53-man roster or put him on the practice squad. And the same thing with Taylor Heineke. I think that's a 3-week designation should he clear. Another notable event that happened for the Vikings, right when the cutdowns were happening, was the Vikings traded a 7th-round draft pick for cornerback Tramaine Brock. Brock had just recently signed with the Seahawks after, I believe, 6 or 7 years with the 49ers. And I'm really excited about this trade. Tramaine Brock is one of the better cornerbacks in the league, and he was pretty high up there last season with his PFF grades, and he has a chance to come in and start right away. I'm assuming the Vikings were worried about the nickel corner spot with Mackenzie Alexander struggling, and that's probably where they're going to have Brock focus on as he gets up to speed with the defense. But I think once he has the playbook digested, you'll probably see Tramaine Brock start in the base 4-3 and then move to the slot in the nickel and then Waynes would come in on the outside. And I expect there'll be some rotation there with Terrence Newman as well, but I think the Vikings were looking to get Alexander off the field after his just uneven performances. Some of them were just dreadful performances there in the preseason. He's clearly not ready to be on the field 60 to 70% of the snaps. So a good move there by the Vikings to solidify their defense in the secondary, and also the 53-man roster. You might have had a few surprises from when we entered training camp. I don't think anyone knew that Tayshawn Bauer, the undrafted free agent, was going to make the 53-man roster, but he did after having a really, really strong camp and preseason. Jaleel Johnson, the fourth-round draft pick, also making the roster, along with now initially Rodney Adams and Stacy Coley, both draft picks, wide receiver rookies for the Vikings, both making the 53-man roster for the time being. I believe now when Michael Floyd comes back from suspension after 4 weeks, one of them will get cut. My guess is it's going to be Adams, since Coley showed probably a little bit more receiver, and the Vikings, I believe, are going to go with Jerick McKinnon as the starting kick returner. So, but Adams, in the meantime, will give the Vikings that extra receiver and a backup on special teams as well in the return game. So, with that said, some other surprises, I guess you would say. I don't think anyone saw that Aviante Collins would make it, but he did at tackle, and so he's going to be a reserve tackle. Although Rashad Hill is probably going to be your swing tackle, Collins making the 53-man roster was a bit of a surprise, but he did earn his spot, so something to be said there. And then Eric Wilson was another undrafted free agent that made it. So looks like the Vikings did pretty well in undrafted free agency, finding a couple diamonds in the rough, so to speak, that may develop into contributors down the line. But for now, they provide depth, and I think some people were expecting Emmanuel Lemur to get cut. He did not. There were certain people, not myself included, but a lot of people thought that Jarius Wright would get cut. I never believed that, because I knew with Floyd serving that 4-game suspension that the Vikings were not going to go without that kind of depth. I mean, of course, you got Diggs and Thielen starting, but then the third wide receiver spot, I think while Floyd is out, you're going to see Treadwell and Wright split some snaps there, depending on the situation. But it's very interesting to note all of the activity that happened there. The Bucky Hodges situation, I know that's rubbed some people the wrong way. It sounds really harsh to be sent to injured reserve for 8 weeks after it's just concussion syndromes, and I think he could probably pass the concussion protocol in a lot less than 8 weeks, but maybe it's a way that the Vikings stash him on the roster, and they just didn't want to go in thin at tight end to the Saints game, and they didn't quite trust Kyle Carter to be an active member yet. But Bell, from what I've read about him, he's a better probably better in the pass receiver than David Morgan. Not quite as good of a blocker, but probably a better blocker than Hodges. But I thought Bucky Hodges did a really good job both blocking and receiving in the preseason. Hopefully he can come back strong once he recovers, and I'm hoping that he clears waivers so the Vikings can keep him around, because I think he's got some good upside there. But we'll see how that shakes out. And now, heading into this game against the Saints, big time drama coming up there. With Adrian Peterson making a few comments, and we'll get into more of that here as the week goes on in our pregame session before the Saints game. But it's getting really interesting. A lot of cool storylines developing with Sam Bradford and Drew Brees. Of course, Sam Bradford breaking Drew Brees' completion percentage record last season, and of course everybody's going to be comparing, Dalvin Cook and Adrian Peterson, or to some extent Latavius Murray and Adrian Peterson as well. With all that coming up on Monday night, very exciting. Can't wait for that big game to come up. But wanted to just quickly recap, the moves that the Vikings made. And I think looking at this roster, I think it looks pretty good going into the season. I would say that it's deeper than last year's team, and it's definitely better. I think the offensive line now with Boone not on the roster anymore. I think he was actually part of the problem in the preseason. If you notice, when Pat Elflein would enter the game and Nick Easton would slide over to left guard, it seems like the Vikings started moving the ball better. This being the first team unit, so it looked like Easton and Elflein, they were opening holes for the running backs. They were providing better pass protection, whereas with Boone, the unit seemed to struggle. So, I think maybe it's a little bit of addition by subtraction. But that's not to rule out that there may be another move or two here before the opener, or maybe down the line. I know the Vikings made a couple of other moves today to their practice squad. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there was a center and a tackle, I know, that were added to the roster today. Let's see if I can bring that up here. Yep, okay. Cornelius Edison and Cedric Lang were added. So, the Vikings are restocking the shelves there for offensive line depth. But I do think that this new lineup, now they'll be given a chance to continue to play together. I mean, this was the group that looked the strongest, and I think that's the best thing going forward. So that's all I have for now. We will, of course, be back with another episode of Vikings Spin before the Vikings take on the Saints, and we'll be analyzing the matchups in that game and all the pregame festivities and hype that's going to be coming up and be talked about this week. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.